Today we're hosting a very special seminar from the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center with acclaimed author Gillian McAllister, and of course, all of those who are joining us online on Book Depository's Facebook and Instagram live streams. Welcome! 大家好，再一次咧歡迎大家嚟到香港會議展覽中心嘅書展現場，參加由 Book Depository 贊助嘅閱讀分享會。今日嘅觀眾咧，除咗在場咁多位之外咧，仲有好多咧喺 Book Depository Facebook 啦同埋 Instagram 收看緊咧直播嘅朋友，都會一齊聽到全球知名作家 Gillian McAllister 寶貴嘅分享㗎。So before we start, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Patricia from Hong Kong, and I'm a fan of Book Depository and also an avid reader, sometimes writer myself. I'm so excited to be here with all of you and help host this special event that has all been made possible thanks to the sponsorship of Book Depository and the support from Hong Kong Book Fair. 咁首先咧，介紹一下我自己先，我係 Patricia， 嚟自香港嘅。咁我哋自己咧都係 Book Depository 嘅 fans 啦。平時除咗中意睇書之餘咧，都會透過寫作去分享一下咧自己嘅一啲思緒㗎。今日好開心可以咧為大家主持呢一場嘅講座，而今次嘅活動咧能夠成功舉辦，都係咧多得 Book Depository 嘅贊助同埋香港書展嘅支持㗎。For those of you who need a refresher, Book Depository is a leading international book retailer with over 20 million titles and free worldwide delivery. The mission is to make books more accessible, affordable, and available to all people. 咁Book Depository 咧，大家可能都知道㗎啦，係國際領先嘅網上零售書店，售賣嘅書籍咧超過2000萬冊，仲咧提供全球免運費嘅優惠㗎喎。而 Book Depository 咧係致力希望可以提供多元化又容易負擔嘅書籍選擇，希望所有人咧都可以體驗到閱讀嘅樂趣。Well, today, thanks to Book Depository, between today and tomorrow evening, we'll be hosting 3 seminar sessions, each featuring a best-selling author. This year, there is something in common for all 3 authors, where they are also renowned in mystery, thriller, and crime novels. And to kick things off this afternoon and to teach everyone a thing or two about how to get and stay published, we have Gillian McAllister. Gillian is a British Sunday Times best-selling author known for 7 novels, all of which have been bestsellers. And now her novels have been translated into multiple languages and have been published in 10 countries around the world, much to the delight of crime fiction and thriller fans. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gillian McAllister. Hello, Gillian. How are you?
Hi, I'm so sorry for being late. I've had a very bad morning with power cuts here, and we live so remotely, it was not possible to communicate this to anybody, so I've been extremely stressed.
Oh, it's all right. Thank you so much for making time to join us. So we're very delighted to have you with us today. We have a lot of fans here joining us in Hong Kong, as well as those joining us online right now. Can't wait to hear your stories and your sharing. So would you like to say a few words to our online audience as well?
Yes, thanks everybody for joining. It's truly an honor, and I'm so sorry again for starting a little bit at 20 minutes late.
Okay, we can't wait to hear about your tips on being published and stay published, as well as some of the stories behind your upcoming book. Then you'll be telling us a lot more about that later. So a quick reminder to our audience, books by Gillian McAllister are all available to purchase on Book Depository. You can also order her upcoming book, Wrong Place, Wrong Time, on Book Depository at any time, with free delivery to more than 130 countries, including Hong Kong. And Gillian, before you start, I would like to also remind our audience, if you have any questions for Gillian, you can always type in your question in the comment box if you are joining us online. If you're joining us here right now in Hong Kong, you can scan the QR code on screen and submit your questions for Gillian. Later on, our moderators will be selecting some of the interesting questions and see if our time allows. If time allows, Gillian will be answering the questions in the Q&A session. All right, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, get ready to learn from Gillian as she'll be sharing with us how to get and stay published. Over to you, Gillian.
Hi, well, thank you all again for having me. So I just thought I would present today on what I know about, which is how I got published and how I stay published. And obviously there's a lot of good fortune and luck involved in both of them, which I'm very aware of. But nevertheless, these are my tips and tricks. So the first slide is my publication story, which, as you can see, I really began writing seriously in 2008, and it was 2016 when I actually got the call to say I would be published. So sit back. So in 2008, I contracted what here in England is known as glandular fever. In America, it's known as mononucleosis. So you may know it with either term, I'm not sure, but I was very sick with it. I was bedridden for over a year and a half. I didn't, in that time, really take any steps. I didn't even collect the post from my doormat. Like, I slept downstairs because I couldn't tackle the stairs. I was very disabled with it. And I was eventually diagnosed, although that can happen with glandular fever, I was eventually diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. And during that time, I wrote my first novel. I'd been writing all of my life. I think I really wrote my first novel when I was 12, and this time I was 22. But this was the first time that I actually finished a manuscript. It was called Three by the Sea. So in 2011, I was well enough to resume I went back to law school. I was sort of well at times, not very well at other times. I had lots of relapses and so on. And anyway, I eventually rejoined the law firm where I was supposed to start my training contract in 2008. And that's where you do 2 years training, on the job until you qualify as a lawyer. So during that time, I shelved this novel because I was very much concentrating on law and trying to stay healthy. But in 2013, I actually got the flu. Somebody came into work very sick, something that now doesn't happen so much. And I had another 6 months off, which was my only ever relapse, really. And I was floored again. And during that time, I wrote another novel because a facet of chronic fatigue syndrome for me was I just needed to be lying down. My body was very bad at being upright, but I was pretty much okay to be awake. I wasn't tired in a sleepy sense. It was more like when you have the flu and when you stand up and you feel so sort of woozy. That was how it was for me. So I wrote a novel called The Quarter-Life Crisis, very much based on my own experiences of health and my relationship at the time. And during that summer, it was a very hot summer, not unlike the summer that we're having at the moment, actually, in the UK, that is responsible for my many power cuts here in the countryside. I was inside on Facebook trying to keep cool, and I saw an advert for a literary agency, and it said, "We're open to submissions." And I'd never really thought about what to do with these manuscripts when writing them. I thought maybe I would self-publish, or maybe I would get a small publisher, or maybe I would do nothing. And by this point, because I had had a kind of falter in my recovery, I thought, actually, I might need a plan B here. I might not be able to be a lawyer forever. So I submitted the first 3 chapters of The Quarter-Life Crisis to this agency. And the next day, to my astonishment, the agent requested the full manuscript. And that is the picture that you have on your screen here. It's framed, that full manuscript request, because I do believe if that had never happened, I might not be writing today. I think I might have just dismissed it as a whim. But actually, I couldn't believe that happened, and that an actual agent thought I was a good enough writer to request that. So hence it's an email in a photo frame still in my office to this very day. And that set me on a journey, really. And so I hadn't finished that book, but I did in those next few weeks, which is not really what I would recommend. And then what happened was the agent read it. It took them several months to read. And ultimately, they did reject it, probably because I finished it in a matter of weeks. But that full manuscript request changed something for me. And I submitted widely to lots of agents after that and got some other full manuscript requests and some other rejections. And ultimately, nobody took me on. But I had a handful of agents that I thought I could write and really wanted to see the next thing I was working on. And so, although I went back to work that autumn after convalescing again, I was very tired of convalescing at this point. I decided to start a new novel, and I started a novel called For the Life of Me. And I wrote it over the following 8 months. I used a phased return to write it in, which was, it was a good use of my time because I was still in bed quite a lot. I was working 3 days a week, but every other day. So I had every other day in bed. I didn't ever do anything at weekends because I was conscious of sort of preserving my health. And I finished that in the summer of 2014. And I sent it to the agents that had enjoyed my work and had rejected me, but kindly and had offered feedback and so on. And I got signed that July. So that's 2014. And as you can see, I didn't yet get the phone call for another 2 years. But I felt, home free at that point. I felt very like I would, I was about to get a movie deal, or I was about to have a bidding war for my novel. So that novel got sent on submission, to Pan Macmillan and Random House and, the publishers on the spines of novels that I had been reading my entire life. And I thought it was a matter of time until I got a deal. But sadly, that winter, actually at my party to celebrate finally having qualified as a lawyer at the end of all of that training, I got an email to say I'd had 9 rejections, and nobody wanted to take the book on. So then in January 2015, I had a sort of regroup with that agent, and we did decide to edit that manuscript because most of the editors had the same problem with it, which was a subplot that none of them liked. So we edited that book, and in summer 2015, sent it on submission again. Again, all the big names. And this time, 3 of them took it to acquisitions, but I still didn't get a deal. And that was probably the lowest point for me because by this time I was working full time, my health was fine, but I felt like I was chasing a different dream, maybe for no reason. The law was a good job, I enjoyed it, and I felt quite hopeless. But nevertheless, all of these editors had said they liked my next idea and maybe I could write that. And so, much like when I tried to get an agent, I felt as though I was almost there. So I decided to write this next novel as a sort of, perhaps, I don't know, I wouldn't say a last-ditch attempt because I would have always been writing, but it was definitely very annoyed by all of the rejections in the process by this point. But I wrote it, and it was more of a thriller called What Jack Did. I wrote it until February of 2016, and then the day before it went on submission, we decided to rename it because Jack had been a character in quite a very successful novel that year, and we thought better to not have it in the title. So I took an office poll, and we decided to call it Everything But the Truth. So that novel went on submission in that February, and it was 2 weeks and 6 days until I heard finally that my agent left me a voicemail, the first one she'd ever left me, saying Penguin want to take you on for 2 books. And I remember everything about that day. I remember the very specific room I was in. I remember the weather because it remains the best moment of my life. So that is just to say, I like to talk about that story because I probably look like perhaps an overnight success to some people, but actually I'm not at all. It took me a lot of work and time to get where I am, and a lot of rejections. Not many writers talk about that very often. So that is how I got published. So that's your context for everything I'm going to talk about next. So this is how I write a book, and this is how I wrote Everything But the Truth, and this is how I wrote, I've actually got my American edition here of Wrong Place, Wrong Time, which is coming out next week in America, and it's already out in the UK here. And it's my opinion that to get published in 2022 today, you need to have a hook, at least if you're looking for a commercial publisher. And for me, a hook is a central question that needs answering. It's a scenario. It can be an initial domino, or it can be a twist. For example, Sarah Pinborough's Behind Her Eyes. The hook is, you'll never believe what happens at the end. And that's why everybody read that book. So some examples of good hooks is The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. The follow-up, The House of Fortune, has just come out and gone straight to #1. So you're in safe hands with Jessie. And the hook of The Miniaturist is who and why is leaving miniature figurines in this woman's house. And before I go to sleep, the hook is very simple. It is about a woman who, when she goes to sleep, her memory is wiped. So how can she trust those around her? And it's a thriller based on amnesia. And I believe it was the first of its kind that did that. I know amnesia is ubiquitous in thrillers since that. The Girl on the Train, a very clear pitch. A woman on a train witnesses something through the window, and what does she do about it? And Sixth Sense, which I always talk about, is about a child that can see dead people, and he solves a crime as part of that. So you can see that basically your novel should be conceptualized in a single line. That is, I believe, the path to success. And the hook really is the call to action. So I've written here, Frodo finding the ring, Harry Potter going to wizarding school. And in each of those examples, The Miniaturist, Before I Go to Sleep, The Girl on the Train, and Sixth Sense, in chapter 1, that hook is raised. In chapter 1, Rachel in The Girl on the Train witnesses what she witnesses. So in my opinion, you should get to it in chapter 1 as well. That is what your reader wants when they read the back of the book. They know what the pitch is, and then they read chapter 1, and the pitch should contain that call to action, in my opinion. And these are just my opinions. There are other ways to do this, but this is what I use. So I have lots of rules when I plot a book beyond the hook. And I am a plotter. I definitely try to get a plan down before starting. So Chekhov's gun is a big rule I use, which is Chekhov said, if there's a gun on the chair in the first act of your play, you must fire it by the third act. And that is, in The Girl on Train, she has to witness something, and whatever that is, that has to have payoff in the final act. It wouldn't be any good if she witnessed something that was completely inconsequential and that strand never went anywhere. Like, that is the overarching hook of that novel. And so taking some of my hooks, in That Night, my book that came out last year, it's about 3 siblings who cause an accident together on holiday and they bury a body. That's the hook. And in plotting out that book, I asked myself, where's the most obvious place they go from that hook? And then I asked myself, okay, so where else can I go? Because the most obvious place from that is, some sort of chase with the police. And I was more interested in their relationships and the aftermath of things that can happen from that initial domino. And another rule I use with plotting is not, I've written here, not and, but, therefore, so. So rather than a journey where they do this and then they do this and then they do this, and it can be quite disconnected, it wouldn't matter if they were doing A, B, C or C, B, A. I say they have to follow a sequence of events where this happens, therefore this happens, but then this happens, rather than just a chain of events, if you see what I mean. And when I plot this out, I try to bear in mind where I want it to end. And with using the Chekhov's gun theory with that night, you would have to think that by the end of the novel, somebody would discover that body and find out what they did. That would be where I would think that plot was going to go. So once these questions are answered, I plot out my book on Microsoft Excel. It sounds very dry, but it's actually, the boxes are so great for a storyboard sort of experience. You can visualize your whole plot. And I sort of breadcrumb these plot points and try to build to a conclusion at about 80%, leaving room for fallout and tying up loose ends. So I've written here, all good plot is logical steps forward that only take place as a result of the previous step. So I've written here, Romeo and Juliet, they meet and fall in love. Therefore, they learn they can't be together, and they only learn that because they met. They get married anyway. They make a plan for their relationship and miscommunications happen, and then they both die. That is the arc of Romeo and Juliet. And you can see it's fairly logical pillar posts that you can hop from. And in Sixth Sense, what I always use Sixth Sense because I think it's basically perfection. Cole, the child, sees dead people. He starts seeing a psychiatrist because of that. Malcolm hears one of the ghosts. Cole figures out how one of the ghosts died, poisoning, and therefore saves his sister. And that would be a great arc anyway. But then, of course, there's the reveal about Malcolm at the very end, which elevates that book, beyond, that film, beyond just a great film into, kind of one of the all-time great twists ever. So the way that I actually do this on the ground is I decide on the hook, which is the beginning, and that can take me months. Usually I'm writing another book and trying to think of a new hook for my next release. And then I decide on the ending. And then I figure out 4 or 5 things that happen along the way, just like I plotted out with Romeo and Juliet, 4 big turning points, 4 important moments. And then I breadcrumb my way between those. So if you're trying to get, pillar 2 is somebody kills somebody, and pillar 1 is their best friends. Between pillar 1 and 2, you would have to show the relationship declining for that to make sense. And then I do a very quick first draft. It takes me probably less than 10 weeks because I just want to get a big lump of clay down so I can play with it. I'm a big editor and re-editor. And then I storyboard what I've done. So I storyboard a plan, write a first draft, and then storyboard it again. And basically, I look at it and think a lot about whether each scene has earned its place and things like that. And one tip I would say in the writing is you can try to have your scene do more than one thing. So if you can show character and move the plot on in one moment, that's very economical. And I think readers like that because it makes for better pace. So other things to ask when plotting are, what does the main character want more than anything? And this can really drive plot, not just character. So in a book called The Martian, which became a film, it was about a man called Mark who, following a space mission, got left on Mars and his crewmates went home. And all he wanted to do was to leave Mars. And the book is essentially what is called try-fail cycles, which I think you see quite often in thrillers where he tries one thing and it doesn't work. He tries another thing and it doesn't work. And what's compelling about that is he wants so badly to get off, and you root for him. So you worry when the things fail and you wonder what he will try next. So if I get stuck, I do try and put an obstacle in the protagonist's way. And sometimes I ask myself, what is the worst case scenario for them? What is the worst thing that could happen now for them? So by this point, you may have a finished manuscript. If not, I hope my plotting tips have helped. So where do you go next? So I would always advise the first step is to get a literary agent. And, you know, there's a lot of myths about having to know them and having to know somebody in the industry, but literary agents do really read everything they are sent. And I believe if you're a good writer and you have a good commercial concept, you will get taken on by an agent. It might take a while, but they definitely do read everything. So don't be afraid of them. Writers pay their wages and they are looking for talent, even if they're looking in the slush pile, as they did with me. You know, I didn't know anyone, I queried blind. So I would look, in terms of who you want your agent to be, I would look in the back of books. So in my acknowledgements, I thank my current agents. So if you were if you wanted to write the kind of fiction I write, you might look who my agents are and send them a query. I know people recommend the Writers and Artists Handbook, and it's good, but it's huge. And actually, Wikipedia has a very useful list, at least British agencies, sorted by a date established, and probably the same for America and, you know, elsewhere around the world. And then I go to the agency's website and I look at each agent, and I look at them in the Bookseller, which is a UK magazine over here, to see what they've sold. And I mean, really, the simplest way to get an agent is to finish your novel, first of all, and then it's to follow their submission guidelines. And they will all be slightly different. And I would very much recommend following them, because really it's like a job interview. You are saying, I've understood your guidelines and, you know, I'm a professional. And if you want the first 10,000 words rather than the first 3 chapters, I'm going to listen to that and do it. So when you do that, usually the submission guidelines will go something like this. They want a query letter. And the way that I constructed my query letter is the first paragraph on why you want that agent. And that should be specific to them. It should show that you've done your research. So a recent sale that they've made, a long-term client who's published work you really like. Perhaps they attended a recent award ceremony or something and you saw on Twitter, or you went yourself, and you can see they're sort of plugged into that part of the industry. And then paragraph 2 should be your book, and it should include that hook and that elevator pitch that we talked about with the girl on the train and before I go to sleep and all of that. And in my opinion, that's all it should include. Then the third paragraph is about you. But for me, I've written include any prizes won and any experiences. But I said, FYI, I had nothing and I still got an agent. So in that I wrote, I'm a lawyer and I work in Birmingham. So that is your query letter. And then usually most agents want 3 chapters, but as I said, do check. So I would say with those 3 chapters, I mean, they are your audition for what an agent is interested in. And I would ask, do they definitely not start too early? There's no filler. Are questions asked? So the hook, but also to some extent answered. You obviously don't want to solve the hook in your first 3 chapters, but you do want to give the reader some information. Is it representative of the book? So do the people narrate those 3 chapters that also narrate the rest of the book? And does it include the hook, which those 3 chapters absolutely must. If you don't get to it in chapter 1, you must get to it by chapter 3. And then the next thing agents want is a synopsis often. And authors generally hate writing synopses, and that is because they do make your book seem crazy when you boil it down to, it's usually an A4 page of what happens in my book. They don't ever read well and just know that that's how they are and it's not you. But they should contain spoilers, and I've written here it's a dispassionate document. So I would say 4 paragraphs on what happened. So basically bullet point your novel and then turn it into an A4 page really about what happens in your book. And don't worry if it sounds awful. So small things, as I said, follow their submission guidelines, address them as dear first name. That's what I did. So dear Claire was my agent. And you can submit to multiple agents at a time, and they would expect that to be happening. So if you're lucky enough to get signed by an agent, the way it works is they make 15% of an author's UK sales, here at least, and 20% of an author's foreign sales. So that is how they make money. You don't pay them anything until you make money. Any agent that wants money up front is probably to be avoided. And so what they would do is they edit with you, and then they pitch that to editors. And if the editor says they want to look at it, they would then send them the full manuscript, not unlike how you query an agent. And an agent sort of queries an editor, and they will draw up a submission list and send it out. And then you have to sit tight, because that's the hard bit, because it's out of your control and you don't really know what's happening. And by that time, you really want it very badly. So if you're lucky enough to get an offer, you would, here at least, they would offer usually for UK and Commonwealth rights, and then your agent would sell your manuscript to foreign markets. And they would offer an advance, which can vary from £1,000 to £1 million. And, you know, we all hear about the £1 million ones, a lot more than the £1,000 ones. But my advance was very much a mid-list advance. It was not the advance for bestseller, which I always think is quite useful to tell people, because some people think unless you're one of those huge advances, you can't, you know, build a career from it, but you can, and I did. And then when you actually get taken on by a publisher, you edit with your editor, usually a structural edit. I'm doing one at the moment for my 8th novel. So this one is book 7, which came out just in May. So also May, I delivered my 8th novel to my publisher, UK and US, and I'm now editing with them. Once you've done those edits, you would do a copy edit, which is often a freelancer, so somebody not employed by the publisher, but they work for lots of different publishers. And they would deal with timeline inconsistencies, grammar. You know, recently I had one saying these flowers in the hospital room in August grow in May, so they wouldn't be in season, like that kind of thing. And then the final step with your publisher is page proofs, where the book is typeset. So this is typeset proof. So it looks like a book, and then you read it. It usually comes as a stack of pages, either electronically or physically, and you flag any errors with tabs, and you can literally hand amend, or you can do like a Word document to show the changes you want in like a table, and then you send it back. And that is the last time you see the book. And for me, I don't read after that time either, because I'll only find another typo that I missed. So once that book is done, you then will be dealing with the marketing and PR at your publisher, which is, you know, so marketing is getting the book into readers' hands, and PR is publicizing the book. So things to know, you know, Wrong Place, Wrong Time was not called that. We brainstormed on a better title than what we had, which was The Day Before. So they may retitle the book, and the art team designed the cover. So I was asked to approve this cover, but I had no idea what the content was going to look like. It just arrived as an image in my inbox. And that's because I'm not an artist. You know, a lot of people think authors design the cover, and we never do. But you do get input, and I can feed back things I did and didn't like about it. And on the PR side, as the author, you are assigned a publicist to work with, and they send out these proofs. You see where it says advanced reader edition. They would go to the press, who you hope will review it. And I would say one final point is, if you can find an author who might be able to offer you a blurb, which is to say an endorsement for your book, I would say that is an extremely useful thing that you can do, because it's a way of showing your publisher that somebody out there who is an expert rates you, but it's also their readers may then read you. So if you're an author at this stage, I would really try and get some author blurbs, because they are very, very useful. And so this brings me to the economics of publishing, which is a sort of interest of mine, because it is where I find myself now, you know, staying published and how it all works is really vital part of my job. And forgive me for going fast. I'm trying not to run over too much given the late start. So I hope this is all going in. So finding out who stocks your novel, this is what I've written here, is, in my opinion, the biggest single moment of a book's publishing journey. And over here, that is very often supermarket selling. So here, as I say, I sell 90% of my novels through the supermarkets. It works differently in different countries. You know, in America, it's not so supermarket based. But nevertheless, who is stocking it and in what numbers is the biggest moment for me of, you know, how many really is it going to sell? And even if readers sort of get wind of this book's come out, if they can't actually find it to buy, it's not going to sell many copies. So who and where stock it, for me, is the single biggest moment. So over here, publishers pitch to supermarkets, and how many titles they can pitch is limited. But you know, and the space is limited, but you would hope that you might get in there. And the timing, brackets, date of publication, I've written there, is important. And so that is, you know, if the summer is full of thrillers and you are an emerging thriller writer, you might come out in the autumn or the January just to have a little bit of space. It took me a long time until I had a summer release because it's very competitive, and you might not get those slots. So to advances. So the publisher will want the author to earn out their advance. So let's say your book retails for £8, it's a paperback, let's say. If your advance is £10,000, you would probably need to sell 10,000 paperbacks and ebooks to earn that back, because you don't earn out at £8 times 10,000, you earn out at your royalty rate. So if you're getting £1 per book, that's why you need to sell 10,000 books to earn back that advance. So that is very rough back of an envelope, because when I was an emerging author, I really wanted to know, what do I actually need to sell? What is the expectation here? And I would have wanted somebody to be able to tell me that. And I would say this doesn't apply to very cheap ebooks, because the 99p or 99 cents ebook game is a totally different one, in my opinion. But that is to say, even if you don't earn out your advance, the publisher is making lots of money anyway. And, you know, even if you sell half of that, they're still making 5,000, you know, books, say, at £8. So that is a lot of money. But they also have overheads other than the author's advance. So, you know, staff, editor, publicist, marketing, cover designer, the rent of the building, all of that. So I've written here, in genre fiction, a total figure across formats in the UK only of 20,000 books is considered good or fine, because that was a sort of, that's the figure I had in mind that I sort of wanted to sell with my debut. So what makes a bestseller then? And it's actually fairly, you know, there's a lot of nitty gritty with what is and isn't a bestseller, really. And I would say the Kindle charts, say, are Amazon only, and their ranks are relative to each other. So to be number one on Kindle, you just have to have sold more Kindle books in the last hour than any other person on Amazon. And there is an algorithm there. So if you have been consistently selling more hour by hour, you might be more likely to stay at number one, even if you're actually the second best-selling book for that hour. Like, there is a lot that goes into it that I don't have time to talk about now, but that is largely how the Amazon charts work. And what makes a Sunday Times bestseller in the UK is something we have here called Nielsen BookScan and Total Consumer Market. They're two different names for the same thing. And that is, you know, what you have to sell to hit the Sunday Times bestseller list, and that is print only. And there is fiction and non-fiction, and then within those there are original fiction, which is hardbacks, and paperbacks. So that is how. So you can only ever hit the Sunday Times if you sell enough print copies. It doesn't matter how many Kindle copies you're selling. And then on to sustaining the success. So whether you sell through with your retailers is incredibly important. And if you get a lot of returns, so if a supermarket buys a lot of books and then returns some, that can be problematic here. And it's a delicate balance with the publisher wanting them to have enough stock, but not so much that they have to return them. And I would say hooks is the biggest thing an author can do, is to continue to write books with very commercial hooks. That is, if I'm ever asked, I say that is the biggest secret to my success, is staying published. Every single year I try to come up with a commercial concept that I would read and that I feel hasn't been done before. And in terms of the author's income, I would say, aside from the UK, foreign rights provides a huge part of a writer's income, And America America is a foreign right in some ways. It's a different English language right, but those things can really bolster an author's income. We focus on the UK here, and you focus on your home market, but actually those foreign rights can make up 70% of your income at times. And another strand to your bow is TV and film rights. If you get optioned, sometimes they pay big, sometimes they pay small, but all of those things are fingers in many pies and sort of investment for the future. And if you have one book that goes into development under option, that is something that might really pay off in the future, and you might access a different readership that way. And finally, I would say I do read my reviews, and I do that because I want to know what it is that makes readers keep coming back for more, but also what they don't like about my fiction. And I do try 7 or 8 books in to learn either way. Are they coming back because they like the things I like, or is it actually something different? And do they like the characters or not? Do they like the plots and the endings or not? So I'll be open for questions now, and you can scan this QR code and you can submit any questions you want to ask me. I'll be ready, willing and able to answer. I'm sorry I've rattled through very quickly after a much stressful morning, as I say, but we're here now, and yes, feel free to ask me anything.
Thank you so much, Gillian, for the sharing. A lot of good tips and useful information for our aspiring authors. And I'm sure our audience will be taking those into their hearts. So we actually have received already a lot of questions from our on-site audience and our online audience. And we have selected 2 of them to present to you so that you can answer them for us. And the first question was like this. Hi, Gillian. Thank you for your sharing. May I ask, in your early experience, have you ever worried about license protection or a copycat, or any sort of problems similar? As you mentioned, you just sent your manuscript to the agent online. That sounds not particularly safe. Gillian, do you have anything to share with this audience?
Well, I would say that as long as you're using reputable agents that are well known with track, they are not going to steal your manuscript. And I mean, what they want to do is sell it, and then they give you the 15% as agreed. Like, I've never really heard of agents stealing ideas, because that is how the industry works. The publisher, if they wanted to, could steal the idea from the agent and then publish it, and then the next year the agent would think that's the idea that I sent, and then that relationship would break down. And I think publishing is an industry that does rely on, it's a gentleman's agreement that nobody's going to steal anything. But I've never heard of that really. And if somebody sent me an idea, I wouldn't steal it. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, I wouldn't ever worry about that, as long as you're not using agents that don't have any kind of reputation or track record. I think as long as you're using reputable ones, that's okay.
So don't need to worry about that at all, and just make sure we write our stories and start writing and reach out to as many agents as possible. All right, the next question is, Hi, Gillian. Can I ask a question about your career in law? Has it inspired your writing? And if you haven't already, would you write a legal thriller? Would agents or publishers be interested in authors who write legal thrillers because there are already a lot in the market? Thank you for your talk. Okay, that was the question, Gillian.
No problem. Thank you. So yeah, first of all, I don't really write too much about the law, but I think working in the law for such a long time was very useful to me because I spent a lot of time around lawyers, and when a big case breaks or when there's a news article that's interesting, you would hear a lot of different lawyers' takes around the water cooler about that. And that really fed my imagination way more than the job, actually. Just kind of spending time with smart people with lots of different opinions, I suppose. And we would talk about, quite controversial issues at times. And I think as well, going to law school and reading all of the case law, it wasn't so much what I was learning, but each bit of case law was a story, really, and they often had a twist. And I sort of enjoyed to learn about those. And as for a legal thriller, I definitely think there are lots of legal thrillers, but there are lots of thrillers generally. There are lots of most types of genre. But I think if you were a lawyer and you wrote a legal thriller, that would definitely be a sort of accolade that a publisher could use to say, this author used to work as a lawyer, so knows what they're talking about, like John Grisham. So I think definitely, if that's what you want to do, but I would always advise to write from the heart, really. And if you don't want to write a legal thriller and you just think it might sell because you used to be a lawyer, then I would steer clear.
Yeah, start from our passion and what we really love. All right, thank you so much, Gillian, for answering the questions for us and all the sharing. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to thank Gillian for joining us today virtually. Thank you so much.